Early morning in Boston's financial district. Rachel Anderson's footsteps were as light as ever as she entered the Prudential Tower. Dressed in a navy Brooks Brothers suit, she was the very picture of a typical Boston career woman. Several meetings were already waiting for her in the investment advisory office on the upper floors. "Good morning, Ms. Anderson. You have a meeting with J.P. Morgan clients at 9 a.m. today." After exchanging greetings with the receptionist, Rachel headed to her office. As one of the youngest senior investment advisors at a major financial institution, her reputation was built entirely independent of her father's influence. She enjoyed deep trust from her clients and consistently maintained top-tier performance records. As she sat at her desk reviewing the day's schedule, her smartphone vibrated softly. "How about golf this weekend? I'm confident I can beat my best score. Let's try the new course at the country club." "Dad." Rachel couldn't help but smile. William Anderson, despite being the CEO of a real estate development company, always made time to enjoy weekend golf with his daughter. His gentle personality and foresight were highly regarded in Boston's business community. Meanwhile, on Newbury Street, mother and daughter Patricia and Jessica Anderson were scrutinizing the latest Chanel bags. Their appearance, perfect makeup and flashy accessories, drew the attention of passers-by. "Jessica, this bag would be perfect for the board meetings," Patricia winked at her daughter. "Once you become an executive, our lifestyle will become even more wonderful. Our position in society will rise even further." "Yes, Mother. It's only natural that I'll take over Dad's company." Jessica cast a satisfied glance at her reflection in the mirror. Despite others pointing out her lack of competence, she had steadily climbed the corporate ladder with her mother's backing. Just yesterday, she had purchased a new Range Rover against her father's wishes. In Rachel's office, the afternoon client meeting was drawing to a close. They were engaged in passionate discussions about a new investment property planned for construction in Chestnut Hill, an upscale residential area in suburban Boston. Just then, Rachel's phone rang. The display showed Mount Auburn Hospital. "Ms. Anderson, I'm terribly sorry to tell you, your father has had a heart attack." When she arrived at the hospital, driving her BMW 5 Series at full speed, it was already too late. William Anderson had quietly ended his 68 years of life. In the stark white hospital room, Patricia was letting out dramatic sobs, while Jessica struggled to maintain her composure, seemingly more concerned about ruining her expensive makeup. Beside them, Rachel silently held her father's cold hand. The sensation of his warmth slipping away was crushing her heart. The next day, meetings with the high-end funeral home began. In the reception room overlooking the Charles River, Patricia was already discussing the inheritance. "Please prepare the finest casket. Something befitting my husband's final farewell. Of course, the costs will be covered by the inheritance." Patricia was eagerly comparing funeral home catalogs. There was something calculating in her eyes. "Let's add this option too. We need to consider appearances. Given our position, we should make it as luxurious as possible." Jessica made no attempt to hide her fixation, nervously fidgeting with her new brand-name bag on her lap. Rachel gazed out the window as she listened to their conversation. The early summer sunlight illuminated the grass at the country club, where she had just promised to play one last round with her father. The sight brought tears to her eyes. Those days filled with sincerity and loving kindness that her father cherished until the end already felt like a distant past. Mount Auburn Cemetery's funeral home. It was a solid stone building standing in one of Massachusetts' most historic cemeteries. The June overcast sky cast a soft light through the stained glass windows. Outside, gardeners were quietly tending to the lawn, their figures barely visible through the windows among the colorful rose bushes. In the spacious reception room, family members dressed in black mourning clothes had gathered. Patricia nervously touched her Chanel pearl necklace while trying to maintain an air of dignity from her position in the center of an antique sofa. However, her restless gestures betrayed her inner anxiety. Jessica sat beside her mother, constantly working her new Gucci smartphone, occasionally shooting triumphant glances at Rachel. Her eyes no longer bothered to hide the jealousy and hatred she had harbored all along. The heavy oak doors opened, and the executives from her father's company entered. Thomas Watson, the development division director, had lost his usual vigor, his eyes darting anxiously behind his reading glasses. Michael Clark, the finance director, typically a man of few words, was particularly quiet today as he took his seat. Sarah Johnson, the HR director, was a capable female executive who had been discovered by her father. Unable to hide her confusion at today's situation, she occasionally cast worried glances in Rachel's direction. "Thank you all for waiting." The last to appear was John Harper, her father's friend of 30 years and legal counsel to Anderson Real Estate Development. Dressed in a gray suit, his expression was unusually solemn, and he carried a thick envelope. With his years of experience as a lawyer, his face revealed nothing. "We will now proceed with the disclosure of the last will and testament of the late William Anderson." Harper's voice echoed through the silent reception room. Only the ticking of the old wall clock continued to sound in the heavy atmosphere.
"Ah!"
Finally, Patricia exclaimed. Fanning herself with her Hermes scarf, she said, "I've been waiting all week for this. Let's get started." Her thin smile carried a calculating shadow. Beside her, Jessica leaned against her mother, displaying an attitude that seemed to flaunt their solidarity. Harper looked at Patricia for a moment, then took out the will. Rachel noticed that Mary Thompson, her father's secretary, was quietly taking notes in the corner of the room. Mary's sharp observational skills, honed over decades as a founding employee, were one of the things her father trusted most. Today too, she was carrying out her duties without showing any emotion. "I will now read the contents of the will." Harper's voice once again dominated the room. There seemed to be a slight tremor in his tone. "I, William Anderson, hereby declare my final wishes as follows." As he read on, the atmosphere in the room began to change. All of Anderson Real Estate Development's shares, the mansion in Chestnut Hill, the Cape Cod vacation home, the Italian Renaissance art collection, and all domestic and international bank accounts, everything was to be inherited by Patricia and Jessica. Rachel's name didn't appear anywhere. Complete disinheritance, for the eldest daughter of the Anderson family, this was an extremely unusual situation. "Oh my." Patricia dramatically caught her breath, her pearl necklace trembling at her chest. "Rachel, you won't get even a penny." Her voice was mixed with undisguised joy. There was relief that years of planning had finally come to fruition. "Did you really think Dad would leave you anything?" Jessica stood up, making her Christian Louboutin high heels click against the floor. "It's all ours. A traitor like you who refused to take over Dad's company doesn't deserve any inheritance." The executives wore uncomfortable expressions. Sarah Johnson involuntarily lowered her eyes. Thomas Watson made a sound like clearing his throat, and Michael Clark silently fidgeted with his ring. However, Rachel's expression was surprisingly calm. As if she had anticipated this development. "That concludes the reading of the will." Harper spoke up. Now, regarding the related documents. Wait a moment. Patricia interrupted, wiping sweat with her white-gloved hand. Let's take care of anything that needs signatures right away. I don't want to waste any more time. Rachel quietly stood up. Her Brooks Brothers navy suit fit her perfectly as always. Her face, free of makeup, carried her father's intellectual air, and there was even a slight smile on her lips. I don't think we need to rush. Her voice was surprisingly composed. It somehow reminded one of her father's gentle way of speaking. What did you say? Patricia's voice grew sharp. Her gloves were trembling. Everything has been decided. There's no room for you two. At that moment, the reception room doors opened again with a heavy sound. A man carrying a substantial leather briefcase slowly entered the room. Dressed in a quality Brooks Brothers suit, he was every inch the image of a top Boston lawyer. Behind his mild expression lay sharp eyes. In an instant, the color drained from Patricia's face. Jessica dropped her smartphone, its flashy case making a dull sound as it hit the marble floor. This is my lawyer, Michael Sterling. Rachel's voice quietly echoed through the room. Her tone carried her father's inherited strength of conviction. The atmosphere in the reception room changed completely. Patricia's hands began to tremble minutely. Beads of cold sweat appeared on Jessica's forehead. Mary Thompson began taking notes even more earnestly. A faint smile could be glimpsed in her diligent work. The executives' gazes moved between Rachel, Sterling, and Harper. Michael Sterling slowly placed his briefcase on the center table of the reception room. His movements carried a definite presence gained from years of courtroom experience. The metal fittings of the substantial leather briefcase reflected a slight gleam. Excuse me. Sterling's voice was surprisingly gentle. However, his eyes held a sharp light. I have brought important evidence today. Patricia couldn't hide her agitation at the unexpected visitor. Her gloved fingers nervously played with her pearl necklace. Evidence? Evidence of what? There was a slight tremor in her voice. John Harper stepped forward. I also have an important report. Saying this, he took out new documents. The late William Anderson had anticipated today's events. A shock ran through the venue. What do you mean? Jessica spoke up. Her voice had lost its usual haughty tone. Sterling opened his briefcase and took out a photograph. It showed Patricia and Jessica having a secret meeting with someone at the upscale restaurant Atlantic Fish. This photograph was taken at 8:27 p.m. on May 15th. Sterling's voice quietly echoed through the room. It shows when you two met with James Morrison, a former Back Bay district lawyer who specializes in document forgery. Patricia's face grew even paler. No. Jessica's voice trembled slightly. Mary Thompson stood up and submitted new evidence. I would like to submit this audio recording. The recording played. Mrs. Patricia, Ms. Jessica. I will handle the will forgery perfectly. The fee will be. Patricia nearly fell from her chair. Jessica covered her face with both hands. There's more. Harper took out new documents. Mr. William had been monitoring your actions for some time. They contained detailed records of Patricia and Jessica's misappropriation of company funds, under-the-table deals, and numerous false reports. Her father had known everything but had hoped until his last moment that the two would change their ways. But why? Rachel's voice was tinged with deep sadness. Why would you do such things? It's your fault. Jessica suddenly shouted. You were always father's favorite. I. Her voice suddenly changed to sobbing. Patricia began speaking in a surprisingly calm voice. We couldn't let anyone else inherit. We had to protect this lifestyle, this position. Her voice was mixed with years of obsession and fear. Please look at the real will. Harper took out the final document. It was the genuine will, created just before her father's death. I leave the management rights of Anderson Real Estate Development and the majority of all assets to my beloved daughter, Rachel. Her integrity and capability are sufficient to entrust our company's future. For Patricia and Jessica, I establish a trust fund for appropriate living expenses. However, this is conditional upon their showing willingness to reform. Until the end, I believed in family bonds. However, at the same time, it is my duty to protect justice and integrity. Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes. Suddenly, Jessica stood up and tried to run toward the exit. However, at that moment, the door opened and 2 police officers entered. Patricia suddenly changed. You don't understand. She screamed. The effort I put in to maintain this position. Her voice gradually became more distraught. Jessica collapsed on the spot. Mother, we were wrong, weren't we? For the first time, genuine emotion seeped into her voice. Rachel quietly closed her eyes. Outside the window, it had begun to rain. Raindrops fell one by one onto the surface of the Charles River. A new chapter was about to begin in this city her father had loved. Mary Thompson gently placed her hand on Rachel's shoulder. Mr. William trusted you until the very end. Her voice carried 30 years of dedication and truth. The executives let out deep sighs, but their expressions seemed somewhat relieved. Sarah Johnson smiled slightly with a nod. The police officers quietly led Patricia and Jessica away. The backs of the 2 women dressed in luxury brands had lost all dignity and grace. Harper murmured while reviewing the final documents. William, you were an excellent executive until the end. Rachel stood by the window, gazing at the rain-soaked rose garden. The roses her father had carefully tended were still blooming with unchanged beauty. Their appearance seemed to tell the story of the value of living with integrity. The John Joseph Moakley Federal Courthouse. Early summer sunlight poured down on the modern building overlooking Boston Harbor. The glass and steel exterior walls vividly reflected the morning light. Rachel entered through the courthouse's heavy oak doors with Attorney Sterling. Dressed in a Brooks Brothers gray suit, her expression showed firm determination. It was the quiet strength she had inherited from her father. Everything is prepared. Sterling continued his explanation while checking a thick stack of documents. Mary Thompson's testimony is perfect. Furthermore, suspect Morrison has agreed to a plea bargain. In the courtroom gallery, employees of Anderson Real Estate Development had already gathered. Jennifer Walker from the Development Division wore an anxious expression. She was likely concerned about the fate of new projects. David Chen from HR gently smiled at the younger employees, as if to encourage them. All rise. As the judge entered, the courtroom fell silent. Prosecutor Sarah Brown stood up. Her navy suit carried the dignity of the Supreme Prosecutor's Office. In today's trial, we will reveal the full extent of serious corporate crimes related to Anderson Real Estate Development. At that moment, Patricia shuddered in the defendant's seat. Her former arrogant attitude had disappeared, and her face, now without the pearl necklace, showed deep fatigue. Jessica remained looking down, unable to stop her hands from trembling. The prosecution calls its first witness, Mary Thompson. Mary walked to the witness stand with sure steps that spoke of her 30 years of experience. "I could not betray President William Anderson's trust." Her voice, though quiet, resonated throughout the courtroom. "I personally confirmed that Mrs. Patricia and Ms. Jessica had prepared a forged will." A murmur ran through the courtroom. "Specifically, how did you become aware of this fact?" Mary answered the prosecutor's question in detail. "On May 15th, I witnessed their secret meeting at Atlantic Fish from the company car. After that, I noticed suspicious movements in the office." Her testimony was chronologically accurate, true to her meticulous nature. The court sketch artist carefully captured the scene. Suspect Morrison was called as the next witness. "Mrs. Patricia Anderson promised me a fee of $500,000. His confession caused another stir in the gallery. "I was asked to forge the will and create related documents." After the lunch break, the afternoon witness examination began. Financial experts explained the details of fraudulent transfers, and handwriting experts presented their analysis of the forged signatures. Security camera footage submitted as evidence showed Patricia and Jessica manipulating documents in the office late at night. Faced with this decisive evidence, the two defendants bowed their heads even lower. Next, we will examine the financial records of Anderson Real Estate Development. The prosecutor displayed several documents on the screen. "We have discovered that approximately $20 million was misappropriated over the past 3 years. Patricia's defense attorney attempted to argue. "Our clients acted for the company's benefit." However, the words rang hollow. The evidence was too clear, there was no room for excuses. Through the courtroom windows, ships could be seen docked in Boston Harbor. A sea breeze faintly drifted into the room. Rachel nostalgically gazed at the harbor view, remembering the yacht trips her father often took her on. The words of HR Director Sarah Johnson, who took the witness stand, delivered another shock to the courtroom. Despite Ms. Jessica Anderson's severe lack of practical ability, she received unwarranted promotions due to pressure from Mrs. Patricia. At these words, Jessica's shoulders shook violently. It was the first time her incompetence had been publicly acknowledged. After the evidence examination concluded, the time for closing arguments arrived. Prosecutor Brown stood up. "The defendant's actions go beyond mere corporate crime. This is an extremely serious offense that trampled on the trust of a family and the love of the late Mr. William Anderson." On the day of the verdict, the courtroom was filled with even greater tension. Judge Martha Hamilton delivered the sentence in a solemn voice. "I hereby sentence defendant Patricia Anderson to 10 years in prison. Defendant Jessica Anderson is sentenced to 7 years in prison. Furthermore, I order both defendants to make full restitution of all misappropriated funds." At the moment the verdict was announced, Patricia began to cry as if collapsing. Jessica looked at Rachel for a moment, then bowed her head deeply. For the first time, genuine regret could be seen in her manner. After the trial, Rachel descended the courthouse steps. While reporters swarmed around her, she maintained her father's gentle smile and quietly responded, "I will refrain from making any further comments." That evening, an all-employee meeting was held at the Anderson Real Estate Development office. "Our company will make a fresh start as a corporation that values integrity and capability above all else, continuing the will of our founder, William Anderson." The employees nodded vigorously at Rachel's words. Some even had tears in their eyes. Outside the window, the sun was setting over Boston. It was as if announcing the end of an old era and the beginning of a new one. On the Longfellow Bridge over the Charles River, Rachel stopped walking. The surface of the river glowed peacefully in the twilight. "Father, I will carry on with determination." Those words were carried far away on the evening breeze. 1 year later, in early summer, morning sunlight poured down on the high-rise building in Back Bay where Anderson Real Estate Development was located. In the president's office on the top floor, Rachel was reviewing plans for a new project. An eco-friendly luxury housing development planned for Chestnut Hill. It was a project her father had been nurturing during his lifetime. On her desk, a photo of her and her father from their last golf game at the country club was discreetly displayed. "President, the development committee members have all arrived," Mary Thompson announced with her usual composure. The veteran secretary from the company's founding days continued to support Rachel with unwavering loyalty. In the conference room were Thomas Watson from the Development Division, Michael Clark from Finance, and Sarah Johnson from HR. Their formerly anxious expressions were gone, replaced by anticipation for the new era. "Good morning, everyone." Rachel smiled warmly, just like her father used to. "Today, I'd like to discuss a new project with you." The screen displayed renderings of a housing development that incorporated the latest environmentally conscious technology. Efficiently placed solar panels, sophisticated design that blended with the local landscape, and well-appointed community spaces. "Mr. Williams' dream is finally becoming reality," Mary whispered with deep emotion. As the project explanation continued, Rachel's cell phone vibrated briefly. It was a call from the Boston Women's Correctional Facility. After lunch, Rachel headed to the prison. In the visiting room, Jessica was waiting in prison attire. Her former haughty attitude had disappeared, and her bare face showed signs of deep introspection. "Sister." Jessica's voice trembled slightly. "In the rehabilitation program's essay contest, I won first prize." Rachel silently read through the manuscript paper her sister handed her. "For years, I envied and hated my sister. I lived only for appearances and vanity despite lacking both ability and effort. But now I understand. What father truly valued was integrity as a human being." "Jessica." Rachel gently held her sister's hand. "Mother is changing little by little too," Jessica continued. "She still hasn't completely let go of her attachment to a luxurious lifestyle, but she's reading Mother Teresa's book in the prison library." These words brought an inadvertent smile to Rachel's face. In the afternoon, Rachel visited Mount Auburn Cemetery. Fresh white roses had been placed at her father's grave. Surely Mary had brought them early that morning. "Father, the company is doing well." Rachel spoke quietly. "I will definitely make that project a success." The wind blew, scattering rose petals. Meanwhile, Boston media was widely reporting on Anderson Real Estate Development's progress. A brilliant fusion of tradition and innovation, the rise of a new generation of female executives, a model for corporate ethics renewal. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Rachel had answered, "The foundation of our company is the value of the integrity built by our founder, my father. This is a conviction that will never waver, no matter what era we're in." The two in the Boston Women's Correctional Facility were also reading that article. How foolish we were. Patricia clutched the newspaper, shedding tears of genuine regret for the first time. At dusk, Rachel was walking along the Charles River, a place full of memories, with her father. The river's surface, illuminated by the setting sun, sparkled like her father's gentle smile. Rachel. When she turned around, Sarah Johnson was running toward her. The Chestnut Hill Project has been nominated for the city's environmental award. Rachel took a deep breath. The sea breeze reminded her of the days she used to sail with her father on his yacht. That night, as the office lights were turning off, Rachel was looking down at the night view from the top floor window. Countless lights twinkled in the city of Boston. When she returned to her desk, there was a new proposal document. On the cover was a single line in Mary's meticulous handwriting. Mr. William would surely be proud. Rachel nodded quietly while looking at the photo with her father. A new morning was about to begin. White yachts floated on the Charles River as always, and the grass at the country club gleamed with morning dew. The city of Boston seemed to be quietly watching over the dawn of a new era.